Okay, so when we left off, we were talking about bringing up the idea that, like, sometimes when you speak multiple languages, they found that you think in different languages depending on the situation. Now, let's see. I got to share my screen first. Sorry. Um, can you describe a toaster? What are some of the characteristics of a toaster? Okay, Jack's just showing his hand. Yeah. All right. What are some of anybody else? What are some of the characteristics of a toaster? Usually they're going to be metal. Okay. Anything else? All right. Has a cord to plug it in. Okay. All right. So if we described it, most would probably say, "Oh, it's metal. It's black. It's silver. It has something inside of it, like blah blah blah. You toast things with it." Oh, it's all very neutral. What they have found is that languages, and this is going along with this, languages that have gendered nouns, like in Spanish, toaster is, I think it's like la tostado or something like that. Languages that have gendered nouns, people who speak those languages think about them more in terms of their gender. Like they will describe a toaster in more feminine terms because it is a feminine object. Right? This is the idea of what initially was called linguistic determinism. Linguistic determinism is the original term for this. And basically, what that meant was that the language that we speak determines how we think. Such as some of the early evidence of this was with the Hopi tribe from Southwest U.S. And the Hopi tribe, in their native language, they don't have a past tense. And so the belief was that because they don't have a past tense, they are not able to think about the past. Now, that is not true. They can still think about the past, they just may think about it differently or discuss it differently. So, this idea that it determines how we think has been disproven, but the newer version of this, that there is a lot of evidence that supports, is what, and it's a vocab term, is what is called linguistic influence or linguistic relativity. The idea that how we think is relative to the language that we speak. So, can you count without numbers? Can anybody here count without numbers? If you're still, I mean, if you're still using your fingers, like those are still representing numbers. Okay. No. And it's like it's impossible for us to think about it because we just know numbers and we just know one, two, three, four. Like there's no way to think about it. There's a tribe in the Amazon called the Piraha that only has numbers up to three. And therefore, when they don't aren't as good at distinguishing larger groups of things as we are. We can sit there and estimate and say, oh, well, there are 15 things. These people who only have numbers up to three, they can say, I want three chickens. But beyond that, they're going to be like, well, give me some chickens. And some chickens might mean something totally different. But the fact that they don't have language for counting means that the way that they think about numbers is different. The way they think about amounts is different. Um, let's see. So, for instance, another example of this is in Mandarin. In Mandarin, they talk about time as being vertical. Like they use word like time, and I'm not sure if this is entirely right, but I know the idea is they talk about time as like being like a height, right? So you're like time is rising, whereas in English we talk about time as horizontal. So rather than it being a height, we see time as a length stretching out beyond us rather than above us. And how we think about time then changes. In Japanese, they have more words for intrapersonal emotions. Okay, meaning like emotions that are shared between people, like sympathy. In English, we have more words for interpersonal emotions, emotions that are personal to us. And that has a big influence on Japan is what's considered a collectivistic society where they think more about the good of the group. Where in the US, we're what's called individualistic, where our first thought is about the good of us. Has anybody ever seen the movie Arrival? Has Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner? Anybody? Yeah, yeah. Movie is it's a really cool movie, and I watched it like on a flight once, and I didn't realize what it was about until the end. I was like, oh, holy shit, this is a cool movie. But like, it's about worst linguistic relativity and how we think about things influences. And it's an alien movie, but it's also like a. I'm sure it's streaming on something. It's really good. It's very confusing though. Okay. All right. So, yeah, another example, how we perceive colors changes based on our language. What they have found is that um, when we see two colors that have different names, okay, like a color that we see it was closer to green on the spectrum is right next to a color that's closer to blue on the spectrum, we will actually see these colors as being more similar than these two because of how we group them, because of the language that we use to group them. It's the same idea as how, you know, females can perceive more colors than males can. Right? Have you all heard that before? Anybody know why females can perceive more colors than guys can? Anybody? Girls are taught more words for colors when they're younger. Think about like, guys just like wear like jeans and whatever, but girls like learn how to match more often and stuff like that. And so it actually, because they have the language for it, they're able to perceive more of them. Like I don't know the difference between like pink and magenta. Right. And then lastly, um, thinking in images. If I ask you, we really don't realize that we're doing it because it's a part of implicit memory, but a lot of the thinking that we do is in images. Um, if I were to ask you without looking at a keyboard to draw a keyboard or tell me where different letters are, you would actually be able to do it probably relatively well because you just think about where your hands are and how you would type. So this is a lot of what we do. Um, what they have found, interestingly, is when you mentally rehearse doing something in your mind, it is actually similar to actually practicing it. So they did an experiment where they had female basketball players visualize shooting and making 100 free throws. So they had them visualize it, and then one group just do it. And the group that visualized it ahead of time was actually better at shooting free throws than the group that didn't visualize it ahead of time or beforehand. Okay. So they basically found like this is essentially like a form of mental practice. If you think about those of you that can like I can visualize like lacrosse plays in my head, not like not all my girls, but I can, and it helps me sort of learn the stuff better when I am when I'm visualizing stuff. All right. Are there any questions about that? Okay. I actually should have you out of here relative, even though we lost a little bit of time. Okay. All right. Now, guys, I want you to go to, there's a new PowerPoint called something with intelligence. Okay, let's go to that. And we're going to go through 2 of the 4 theories. Okay, so now we're getting into kind of the last little part of cognition. We're going to talk about intelligence, what exactly is intelligence, and then we're going to talk about testing. All right, how do we develop tests, and then also individual differences? What makes one person smarter than the other person and whatnot? Differences within a group. I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is not the most exciting part of the class. I think intelligence is fine. Testing, though, is, in my opinion, relatively boring. So, but we got to go over it. So, what is it that makes us smart or not smart? The idea of intelligence has changed a lot over the years. Going from the idea that intelligence is how book smart are you, to we now know that intelligence is a lot of different things. Okay, that it's just kind of a broad term that encompasses many different skills. We know that it's the ability to learn from experience, solve problems, and use knowledge to adapt to new situations. Okay, and we know people of low intelligence maybe have a hard time doing any of these things, right? But what we normally think of as intelligence just like you're being a really good student. Let me ask you, so if we're talking about geniuses, would we consider LeBron James to be a genius? Or Michael Jordan, or Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady? Would we consider them to be geniuses? No, not in, well, in their game. Yeah. I mean, isn't somebody at like different level when we talk about those of you that play sports, you always hear the phrase like they have a really high IQ. Like, right? Isn't that a form? Isn't being really good at a sport and understanding the sport and learning from experience playing the sport and adapting to new situations, isn't that a sign of intelligence? Right. So, you know, we talk about like Dave Chappelle, all right? Dave Chappelle isn't when he begin. Some of you probably don't even know who Dave Chappelle is, but like he may not be. I mean, he's smart, but he's not brilliant. But we could probably consider him to be a comedic genius. I think he's the smartest. I think he's maybe the best comedian of all time. Okay. So, when we think about intelligence, we do have to think about it in a broader sense than just, wow, that person gets straight A's. They're so intelligent. There are plenty of y'all who don't get straight A's but are really damn good at doing other things. All right, so a couple of theories. The first theory in the early 1900s is done by a guy named Charles Spearman, and it is what is called general intelligence, or G factor. Basically, what Spearman hypothesized, and this is mostly looking at book smarts, what Spearman said was that smart is smart. Okay? When you think about a person who is good in one area of something, especially when it comes to academics, they tend to be good across the board, right? That they just kind of have a general level of intelligence. That you rarely see somebody who has an A in all their history classes and an F in math classes. Now, they may have an A in history and a C in math, but that might be because they don't like math and they just don't try as hard. Okay. But essentially, what G factor says is that smart is smart and unfortunately, dumb is dumb. People that are dumb in one area, especially academically, tend to not be good across the board. This general intelligence, this G factor, is an idea that he came up with where he basically he took multiple items and meshed them into one number, a number that would represent your intelligence, similar to what we think of now as IQ. Although this is slightly different than IQ. This is a more generalized, a more basic version of IQ. It took multiple items and synthesized them into one number to represent your general intelligence. Now, these multiple items that he took are what are called S factors, or specific intelligences. So we could say like mathematical, logical, linguistic. All right, all of these could be specific intelligences. Oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. And what he would use, he would give an intelligence test. Give an intelligence test and use what is called factor analysis. Now, don't get in the weeds with this. You just basically got to know a definition. But factor analysis is where they take items from a test, related items from a test, and they analyze how they correlate with one another. Meaning, if somebody answers a question this way, are they more likely to answer this question this way? Now, how many of you all have taken, this will come back up when we talk about personality tests. How many of you all have taken a personality test before, like the Myers-Briggs, or what's called 16 personalities? Okay, you all seen that before? Or some of you maybe for employment have had to take the MMPI, or maybe you've taken the Big Five, or maybe you've taken if you were a type of onion, what type of onion would you be? Okay. But has anybody ever noticed on those personality tests that a lot of the questions are similar to each other? Like they're asking the same thing, but they're just asking it in different ways. Yeah, that's factor analysis. What they're looking to see is that do those questions, do the way that you answer them correlate with one another? With intelligence tests, that's what they look at too. When you are good at one factor, are you good at other ones? And what they found for the most part was that generally people that, so all of these are specific intelligences, and then you would take their level, synthesize it, and then you get the G factor out of that. Your general, I can say Madhavan, his G factor is blah blah. I don't know. I don't actually know how these actually work, but I don't know how they do the math. All right, so G factor has basically been disproven because it is it's a very simplified version of intelligence. And as we know, smart is not necessarily smart. Now, around the same time, does anybody have any questions about Spearman and G factor? Oh, I saw a mnemonic on the AP Psych page, Facebook page, might help you remember it. If you imagine a target and the bullseye is a G, and then somebody like throwing a spear at it, Spearman, G factor. I don't know if that would help or not, but it might. All right, we're going to do one other theory, and then we got a video to watch, and then we'll be done. All right, are there any questions there? Well, around the same time, there's another guy named Howard Gardner that looks at intelligence totally differently. He kind of takes a more, kind of, I guess you could say, holistic approach to it. But he said, no, we can't judge people just off of one metric of intelligence because intelligence is a lot of different things. And so he said, instead of the one G factor, instead of the single G factor, he believed that we have that there are at least 8 different types of intelligence. This is where the idea of well, intelligence is not just academic comes about. So if you think about it's similar to, have you all seen this stuff with what's your learning style and blah, blah, blah. Kind of similar to that, except that is the learning style stuff is nonsense. It's not real. It's pop psychology. Okay, but so what he believed is that there were all these different, we could call them competencies. And that all of us kind of differ in how well we do in each one. And if you want to, I linked a multiple intelligences test on Canvas if you want to do it to see where you score high on. And some of you have probably taken one of these before. But you need to know basically what they are. Linguistic intelligence. Who do you think would score high in linguistic intelligence? People who know a lot of languages, writers, public speakers, people who are good at public speaking. Would it be high in linguistic intelligence? So anybody who uses language very well. Logical mathematical, people that are good at patterns and math, like people who work in code breaking for the CIA would be high in logical mathematical. Spatial intelligence. Anybody know who would score high in spatial intelligence and what that means? Athletes do need to have good spatial intelligence, especially athletes that play team sport and understand those that play team sport know that spacing is one of the biggest things basketball, okay, or lacrosse or field hockey or whatnot. But this also more so kind of applies to architects and artists and people who have a good idea of who can like visualize space. Musical, I think, is pretty straightforward. Who do you think would have a high body kinesthetic? Athletes, yeah. Okay. Having like good body control, things like that is considered a type of intelligence. Intrapersonal, intrapersonal, people that are really good with others, like people who are very emotionally aware. So hopefully, like teachers should have good intrapersonal intelligence. A therapist should have good interpersonal intelligence. Yes, Haley. Interpersonal is people who are very self aware, people who understand their limitations are said to have high interpersonal intelligence. And then naturalistic, what do you think naturalistic would be? Hmm? Maybe a travel person could be people who have like a strong connection with nature, like people who are like really good. Like my brother would have is high. My brother's a wildlife biologist, and so he would have a high. Or like I have a pretty high one. I'm good in like the woods. Like you put me in the woods, and I'll figure out how to do shit. Okay, I'll figure out how to like get out. All right, or like people, even people who are like really good at like keeping plants alive in their house would have a high naturalistic intelligence. Now, criticism of this is that it's probably too broad now, but there is truth to this. And there is evidence of these multiple intelligences. The evidence here is prodigies and savants. Now, does anybody know what a prodigy is? Basically, a kid who's really smart in a specific area. Yeah, it's a kid. A prodigy is a kid who a child that excels in an area where you wouldn't necessarily expect a kid that age to excel. So, like Mozart was a prodigy. Like Mozart wrote his first symphony when he was like 7 or something like that. Tiger Woods was a prodigy. If you watch Tiger Woods play golf when he was like 6, like he's better than Coach Webb at age 6 probably. Um, and Coach Webb's a pretty good golfer. So prodigies are people that just kids who have normal cognitive ability, but they excel in an area. On the other side of that is what are called savants. Savants, and this again, this is evidence for multiple intelligences. Savants are people that have a low cognitive ability, but excel in one area. It's like they are off the charts in one area. Like if anybody has ever seen Rain Man, okay? Rain Man, it's this is common. This is most common in autism spectrum disorder. Rain Man's about a guy low cognitive ability, has autism, but he's able to count things exceptionally fast. There's a guy named Stephen Wiltshire who can be shown. There's a video of him. He's flying in a helicopter over Manhattan, and he gets down and he's able to draw from memory every single building in Manhattan just by seeing it all once. Okay. Those are savants, people with low cognitive ability, but they excel in one area. And so here is, finish up with this. This is a video of a guy. His name is Derek Paravicini. And he has probably the cognitive ability of a 3-year-old or so, but he is an exceptional piano player.
Yet, when you meet him away from the keyboard, as we first did in London 6 years ago, the contrast is shocking. Can you hold up 3 fingers for me?
I can do that.
Can you hold up 3?
I don't know how to do it.
Want me to show you 3?
Yes, please,
Okay.
yes.
Derek is a musical savant, blessed with an island of extreme talent in a sea of profound disability. Derek was excited to show us the skills that make him so exceptional. His ability to instantly call up any piece of music he has ever heard, like YMCA. Can you play that one?
I can play YMCA.
And I asked him to play a show tune. But it isn't just that Derek remembers them. He can transform them effortlessly and seamlessly into the styles of different musicians, like jazz greats. Switch to Oscar Peterson. How's about Dave Brubeck?
It's like he's got libraries of pieces and styles in his head.
Adam Ogleford is Derek's teacher.
He can just whip out a piece book and a style book and just bring them together. It just kind of explodes.